Hi, welcome again to Art Shorts. If you've been on the Bergen Community College campus, you may have noticed a spot by the parking garage near the campus loop where there are four 15-foot tall steel poles defining a cube shape sticking up from the ground. You might not realize that this is actually a sculpture. It was created and installed in the 1970s in the college's early days by sculptor Forrest Frosty Meyers. It was put in place before the parking garage was built, and it occupied a neatly groomed lawn. Now, unfortunately, the area has become overgrown, become a de facto storm sewer containment marsh, or beehives were later installed. We're going to rehabilitate the sculpture and the landscaping, but that's not the real story here. We're going to talk about the moon and the first moon museum. That's right. Forrest Myers, the sculptor who created these four poles on the BCC campus, sent the very first art museum to the moon. Myers was part of a vibrant art scene in downtown New York City during the 1960s and 70s. His minimalist sculptures were purchased by collectors and museums around the world, including the Whitney and the Tate in England. He's probably most famous for his piece called The Wall, or The Gateway to Soho, that's built on the side of a building at 599 Broadway. It's about 8 stories tall. He's been a fixture on the art scene for decades, and his work, sculpture and furniture, tends towards minimalism, pop, and it always has a sense of humor. In 1969, space was definitely the place. Apollo 11 landed astronauts on the moon, and less than 6 months later, Apollo 12 was to be launched on its second mission. Myers got the idea that there should be an art museum on the moon. He said, "My idea was to get 6 great artists together and make a tiny little museum that would be on the moon." Artists came from his group of friends and included Andy Warhol, Robert Rauschenberg, Klaus Oldenburg, David Navros, and John Chamberlain. Pretty good company. Myers attempted several times to get his project sanctioned by NASA. He claims the agency gave him the runaround, and he said, "They never said no, I could just not get them to say anything." So instead of going through the official channels, he did what most artists would do. He smuggled it on board. First, he contacted Experiments in Art and Technology, better known as EAT, a nonprofit group that was linking artists and engineers to create new work. Through EAT, Myers was introduced to some scientists from Bell Labs, specifically Fred Waldhauer. Now, Bell Labs, based in Jersey, was the Silicon Valley of the 60s and 70s and home to 9 Nobel laureates. Using technology normally used to make telephone circuits, the scientists etched the drawings Myers had gathered onto small ceramic wafers. They think that they made 16 or 20 of these, one of them going on the Apollo 12 lunar lander, and the copies going out to the artists and others involved in the project. When NASA was messing around trying to decide what would be allowed onto the module, Waldhauer devised another plan. He knew somebody at Grumman Aircraft who was working on the Apollo 12 lunar lander who was willing to place the wafer on it. He asked Waldhauer how he would know if the art actually made it onto the lander, and Myers was told that the Grumman engineer would send him a telegram when the wafer was in place. And sure enough, at 3:35 p.m., November 12, 1969, less than 2 days before Apollo 12 took off, Myers received a telegram at his house from Cape Canaveral, Florida, stating, "You're on. A-OK, all systems go." And signed, John F. The existence of the work wasn't revealed until Myers informed the New York Times, which ran an article on the project on November 22nd, while Apollo 12 was in transit back from the moon. There are 6 artworks located on the ceramic tile, each one in black and white. Starting at the top left is Andy Warhol's signature, a combined A and W, which, of course, could also be interpreted as a penis. "He was being the terrible bad boy," said Forrest Myers in an interview. When the New York Times published a photo of the wafer, the photographer covered Warhol's contribution, lest they offend the time-sensitive audience. Yeah, okay, it's a dick pic. Next in line, there's a single line as a Next on the wafer is a single line by Robert Rauschenberg. To its right, a black square with thin white lines intersecting, resembling a piece of circuitry by David Navras. Below it is John Chamberlain's contribution, a template pattern which also resembles circuitry. In the lower middle is a geometric variation on Mickey Mouse by Klaus Oldenburg. This was a popular motif for this artist at that time. And Forrest Meyers created the work in the lower left, a computer-generated drawing. So Meyers helped curate and transport the first art museum on the moon. You can think of him, Andy Warhol, Klaus Oldenburg, David Navras, Robert Rauschenberg, and John Chamberlain as you walk past those 4 poles by the parking garage.